All right, so we just wanted to give you an update of where we were with the steps. So this, I think, is something we've maybe seen before. I don't know if Michael's demoed this in a previous TLDR, but these are the multiple packages in a script step. So one of the things I've found doing Kubernetes is that you quite often want to add third-party tools to your cluster. There's a lot of monitoring and a lot of utilities out there that are handy to have. And the instructions for doing that are usually download this source code and then start applying that to your cluster. And that's a really nice use case for having a script step that references additional packages. So in this case here, this is an Nginx ingress controller. This is just a dump of the GitHub repo. And so I can add this as a package to my script step. I'm not altering this in any way. This is just as it comes straight from the source, and then I can start referencing the files in it. So this is not actually Kubernetes specific. This will roll out across script steps generally, but because Michael's the one been doing this mostly, it's something I thought I'd show off because we've used it a fair bit here for ourselves in Kubernetes.
Can you just expand that that script so I can?
Ignore this. It will actually. There should be an extract thing here. I've just ignore all that. You should just.
It just ends up there.
Yeah. So what would normally happen is if I've broken this myself, but if you click extract, it would come out under a directory called Nginx. So I'd probably just cd into Nginx there and do what I need to do.
Cool.
And yeah, so when it's fully sorted out, that's the functionality you'll get. So the second step that I wanted to show you was a step that we have no name for. It's the deploy containers step, but the word deploy is so overloaded in between Octopus and Kubernetes, I'm not sure what we'll end up calling it. But the focus here is to give people kind of a wizard or a single point of contact for doing the kind of standard deployments that you'd expect to do in Kubernetes. Because actually deploying a container or deploying a pod is not particularly useful on its own. You're almost always doing extra things on top of that to make it usable. And so in this case, the overview of this step is that we give you the ability to define Kubernetes deployment resource, which in turn creates pods that have containers. And so these are actually just Docker containers. And then on top of that, we give you a service. So a service is just exposing a pod on a port, so other services of the outside world can talk to it. And then the third step is to define an ingress. And so an ingress is it's basically URL mapping. So this takes a custom URL that someone from the outside would enter and directs it into your cluster and hits the correct service. And so we've put all these together because typically, if you're deploying a fairly simple or fairly standard application, this is the workflow that we think that you'll want to do. And by having all these in one single step, we can abstract away some of the complexity of it. And so here we have the name of the deployment. We say we want one replica of each of the pods. Add some labels. How do you see the deployment happening? Recreate as blow away and start again. Rolling deployment is a progressive upgrade of individual pods. And these two are native to Kubernetes. So these are just settings that we can supply to Kubernetes. Blue-green is something that we've added because it seemed logical, but Kubernetes doesn't have any native support for it. But because we have the luxury of understanding most of your deployment structure through this step, we can give you a tick box that says, yep, build up a whole new deployment, and when that's good to go, switch over in one step, and that gets you the blue-green. This is another case where we've taken advantage of additional packages. So when you're building up a Kubernetes deployment, you can refer to a feed, Docker feed in this case, and have it search for the packages that you want to put in. And although it looks different than what we had before, this is the same underlying functionality. We're literally just adding additional packages as the script step would. So one of the other things we've done, or we've tried to do, is give people some help when they fill this out. So again, because we know everything in here is related, we can say which target port that you exposed on the container do you want, and it can be the named one or the 81, or you can add in anything you want. But most of the time, people will just need to select one of the supplied options there. And that idea carries through as well. So anytime you ask for a port and we know the relationships between them, we'll give you suggestions so you can set them up. And so this pretty much works. There's a lot of cleanup to go in the code, but functionality-wise, this is where we want it to be at. And we spent a bit of time creating the various Kubernetes clusters available to us in the cloud providers, and it's working pretty much as we'd expect. So this is looking really good, and I think this will be, well, this is definitely something that will go out with the first cut of our Kubernetes feature, and hopefully that'll be next month at this point. And so that's me.
Well done, nice.